What's up, everyone? This is the Roommate Investor. How to get into a Section 8 program? Let's talk about it. Today, we're going to talk about that and how to find your first renter. Now, remember, Section 8 is a city, county type program. So, the things that I'm telling you may be subject to change depending on what city, area, town you're in, and all of that. With that being said, the general structure is the same. I have Section 8 housing right now in 3 different cities. Although there's minor differences, the overall structure is the same. So for one, let's talk about how to get into the program. All you want to do is contact your local Section 8 authority or go to the website and do some research on the website. You're going to find one of 2 things. One, you're either going to find that you can quickly fill out a form and your home would automatically be listed on the Section 8 site for renters to go view your home. Now, there may be an additional requirement. They may want you to show proof of ownership that you need to email to them, or you may need to send them an email with some other supporting documentation. But this by far is the easiest method. You can just go directly on the website, complete the form, and will automatically submit, or you can email the form to the email that it gives you. Now, option number 2, which is the more difficult option, is the city may require you to do some upfront work with them, submit a complete packet, maybe turn in certain inspection reports or obtain certain inspection reports before you can even list with the city. Again, you can find all this information online, and oftentimes your county is going to host different types of meetings or seminars to kind of explain to you, what to do. Remember, they're always looking for new landlords, new people, new attraction. So whether you went with option 1 or option 2, hopefully option 1, you can move forward to the next step. Once your property is listed on the Section 8 housing website, now you just wait for the calls. Maybe a few days or a week, you're going to start receiving calls from prospective tenants. One of the first things you want to talk about with the prospective tenants as you start receiving these calls is how much their voucher amount is. Each tenant has a specified voucher amount that they cannot go past. You want to know how much their voucher amount is and for how many bedrooms their voucher is for. For example, in my area, they may say, I have a $1,600 voucher amount for up to 3 bedrooms, something like this. This is very important. You have to understand what you're willing to take, because also in my area, some 3 bedrooms can go for $1,900, $1,800, or $2,000. For me, it's not necessarily about getting the highest rent amount, but a more quality tenant. I would definitely be willing to take a lower rental amount if I feel like I have a high quality tenant, instead of taking a higher rental amount with a low quality tenant. You're going to have higher turnover, more issues, and more headaches that you really don't want to deal with. You really need to know what their voucher amount is for. Now, they can use a 3-bedroom voucher amount for a 5 or 6 bedroom, but be mindful that your 5 or 6 bedroom may go for $2,400 or $2,500, whereas the max that the tenant can do is $1,600. So once you find out what the voucher amount is for and for how many bedrooms, then you want to start asking questions about what percent does the tenant have to pay and what percent does the Section 8 housing program pay. And this is all dependent upon the person and the type of job they have. Section 8 can pay 1%, 50%, 60%. I've seen all cases. Some of my tenants live for free and only pay $200. Some of my tenants pay up to $700. On average, I would say my average rental amount that I receive from the tenant is around $400 or $500, and Section 8 program covers the rest of that rental monthly agreement. This is very important. This is going to dictate how you screen the tenant. The next step is screening the tenant. Be mindful that, yes, we want to look at credit reports, but dealing with the Section 8 program, credit report isn't necessarily going to be the biggest indicator on whether you should rent to that tenant. If the tenant has a 100% voucher amount from the Section 8 program, their credit score doesn't necessarily matter because their rent is being 100% covered. With this being said, it's almost like you want to screen the person rather than the person's history and record. Yes, you want to know how it was with their last landlord and how they treat the home, but really what's most important is the person, especially the higher amount that the Section 8 program is going to pay for you. With that being said, if the Section 8 program starts to get into, oh, we're only paying 60%, 50%, you definitely want to make sure that the tenant has sufficient amount of income to cover their monthly payment that they're going to have to pay to you out of pocket. And also, they're going to need to be able to afford their utilities in any case scenario. They at least need to have enough money coming in, whether it's from other programs, other sources. It doesn't necessarily have to be from a job, but they need to have income coming in to be able to keep the utilities on. As you can see, this screening process is completely different than the traditional screening process that you may be used to. What I always like to do, I like to talk on the phone, and I like to meet them in person. And I kind of like to see their mannerisms and how they conduct themselves in person, almost like an in-person interview. Remember, I'm more focused on the person than the person's profile. I want to see them up close and personal and how they conduct themselves. Once you find the prospective tenant that you want to rent to, you would then submit what's called a RAFTA. This RAFTA packet is something given to each tenant from the Section 8 housing program, and it's a packet that you and the tenant fill out, which mostly is just what's the proposed rent, the proposed lease, the lead paint disclosure, your tenant's rights and responsibilities, how many bedrooms, bath count, things like that. Just basic information about you, basic information about the property, and also your tax and banking information and things like that. The Section 8 program will not start their process or move forward until this RAFTA packet is completed by both parties. And once completed, what I like to do is scan it in and email it directly to the worker. You can also scan a copy and give a copy to the prospective tenant, allow them to turn it in, but you have your own copy as well. I like to go direct to the source and keep everything in a digital format just in case things get lost. Once the Section 8 program receives the RAFTA packet and is turned in, you then will wait maybe 5 to 10 days depending on your county, city, how busy they are, all those factors. And they will then send to you, one, if anything is missing from the packet, if the lease dates are incorrect, anything like that, they're going to send you what updates you need to make, and then you need to resubmit the packet. Once the packet is submitted, they're then going to tell you if the rental amount that you're asking for is acceptable for their program guidelines and standards based on the tenant's income and what they can afford, and also based on the Section 8 guidelines and standards in general. They just want to make sure you can reach the criteria. With this, we're about 50-50. Sometimes they're going to say, yes, this rental amount is acceptable. Sometimes they're going to say, we cannot pay, for example, $1,800, but we can pay $1,600 or $1,650. At this point, you have to make a decision. You don't have to accept the $1,650. You can go find another tenant and go through that process again and submit another RAFTA packet with another tenant. Or you can say, okay, I'll accept this rental amount of $1,650. Once you do that, they give you a form that you need to sign within a few days, and you can quickly sign that, send that back through email. And now it's time to set your inspection. Now, some cities, you have to do 2 inspections. You have to do your city inspection, and then you have to do your Section 8 inspection. In my area, the cities that I've done city inspections for usually were less vigorous and more quick than the Section 8 inspection. They are checking windows and screens and doorknobs and plumbing and toilets and things like that, but it's more like a 30-minute inspection, whereas the Section 8 inspection is usually at minimum an hour in my experience. So now we're at inspection time. There's no way to be completely prepared for a Section 8 inspection, especially if it's your first time. You're not going to have an eye for it. My first Section 8 inspection, I had over 65 items that they wanted me to complete, and they were all small. For example, a tub spout, a door not shutting properly, a sink spout, or a transition piece between these 2 floors aren't perfect, or they open doors that you didn't even know existed, and things like that. Also, the exterior of the home, they're looking at as well. I do what I can before I schedule that first inspection, but really, until you get used to it, they're going to come back with a list of at least 10 or 15 things, unless you have almost a new construction property. But usually the things are small and minor. It can all be completed within 2 to 5 days if you have a solid contractor, maybe even 1 to 3 days, all dependent upon your schedule, your contractor's schedule as well. Some of the main things you want to look for in these inspections, you want to make sure every window can open and close and lock and stay up when it's open. You want to make sure every window has a screen. You want to open every door and make sure every door can open, close smoothly. You want to make sure every tub and sink has a stopper. You want to make sure the toilets do not shake when they move. You want to make sure sinks don't shake when they move. You want to open up your sinks from below, run the water. You want to make sure that no water is dripping or leaking from underneath. You also want to make sure all your appliances are working. Ovens, stoves, microwaves. You want to make sure no interior doors have locks on them. No bedroom doors have locks on them, and things like that. Now, certain things are discretionary. For example, you don't have to have blinds. The tenants can be responsible for that. In my experience, the Section 8 inspectors will work with you, especially if they see that you're trying and they see that you've made the upgrades and you're trying to, get the property up to par. They will definitely work with you for these inspections. It's most likely going to take 2 or 3 times for your first inspection in order to actually pass. The goal with these inspections is to move as fast as possible, because the day that the inspection passes is the day that you can start your lease and you want your tenant to move in. The rule I have with this is I tell the tenant that on the day the inspection passes is the day that the lease starts. They don't necessarily have to move in that day, but that's the day that I'm taking payment, expecting them to move in, and they're getting the keys. And I make sure that this is known up front. I'm looking for people who are looking to move in as quickly as possible. I don't want someone to wait a month or 3 weeks after the inspection passes to try to move in, and now we have to backdate the lease for an extra 3 weeks, because you don't get your money until the day that the tenant technically moves in or is supposed to move in. You don't get your money from the tenant or the Section 8 program. Now, the way it works is that Section 8 will prorate your rent from the time that you move in. Section 8 will prorate your rent from the day that you pass your inspection. For example, if you pass your inspection June 17th, you will be paid the portion that Section 8 owes you, prorated from June 17th to June 30th, for example. Your tenant owes you from June 17th to June 30th, the prorated amount from their portion. Also, the deposit is strictly between you and the tenant. Section 8 program does not get involved with the deposit process. Once you receive your money, you give your tenant the keys, and you finalize all your documents with the Section 8 program, you can now move your tenant in. One big myth with the program and dealing with tenants: if you have a dispute, you have to deal with the dispute between you and the tenant. For example, if your tenant does not pay rent, you cannot go to the Section 8 program and tell them that they're not paying rent and they're not able to reimburse you or do anything of that nature. The tenant is solely responsible for their portion, and the Section 8 program is only responsible for their portion. This is why screening is still an important part of the process, and the tenant still needs income, no matter, even if they're 100% covered for rent, because miscellaneous items, also utilities. If you and the tenant ends up having reconcilable differences and the tenant owes you, you have to take the tenant to court by yourself. Section 8 is not going to do that. That dispute is a civil dispute between you and the tenant. They're behind in rent, or if they didn't follow the lease and you have to take them to court, that's between y'all two solely. However, the Section 8 program will take their voucher from the tenant if found guilty for whatever charge that you brought up upon the tenant. This is why many tenants definitely want to be on their best behavior and stay in the program. Now, one negative that you will find if the tenant is a bad tenant is sometimes when they cannot afford, say, the rent, or they're causing issues in the house but they don't want to pay for it, they can just call the Section 8 inspector. And even if they cause the damage in the house, if they call the Section 8 inspector, you have to fix the problem no matter what, and the inspector is going to give you a certain time frame to do so. They can break the toilet, break the front door, knock rails off the hinges. It does not matter. You're responsible for the house, which is why it's important to get your deposit. If the tenant continues to damage your property, there's really nothing that you can do with the program besides, one, take the deposit at the end of the lease term, give them their notice at the end of the lease term. And if there's extra expenses after they move out, you can take them to court. But remember, that is between you and the tenant. And even if they're able to cover their lease term, the Section 8 housing program won't necessarily kick them out because their lease term was satisfied. Now, if they get evicted or something like that during the lease term, that's when the Section 8 program can step in after the eviction and in the future take their voucher away. So at times you can find yourself kind of running behind the tenant and kind of being under their control because some tenants know how to work the program where after a few months of being good or being on their best behavior, they will definitely start causing issues, calling the inspector multiple times, then cause other issues, calling the inspector again. And it's like if they're not paying on time or if they're doing something wrong, if you say something to them or, if you try to maybe get them to pay for the issues they cause, they could kind of, use that over your head. And every time you try to handle the problem or put them at fault for something that they clearly did, they can always turn it around on you and call the inspector because in the inspector and the program's eyes, they're living in an unfit property. It doesn't matter how the property got like that, but your responsibility as a landlord is to always keep a fit and healthy environment for the tenant. Definitely ask me any questions or subscribe and learn more if you want to know more about the program or anything else.